Hey, quick intro. So, this podcast I just filmed a few days ago, and I'm having it cut the line because I think the topic of ADHD and its parallels and connections with substance abuse is so important. We talk, I've never really heard it come up on calls. And I've been on a lot of sobriety calls in the course of 3 years. And occasionally people will throw out that they have ADHD or ADD, as I call for short, but no one's really talked about the connection. And I've come to realize there are so many parallels, which get into a bit on this podcast, and I'm definitely going to be talking a lot more about because I think it's so important. I said if I had to describe the number one reason I drank, it was due to pressure. Pressure mainly socially to perform, to entertain, to people please. I guess to shut up that perfectionist voice, which also pressured me. But I came to realize it was also the pressure to perform in terms of productivity. And that voice that never forgets when alcohol used to work for us. That's why it's always going through our files in our brain to find a time in any circumstance when we're tempted to drink. It's going to find a time where alcohol worked for us in that circumstance. So it would continually say days when I would be looking to be productive on my computer. I'd say, when I own my pizza shop, I'm going to do marketing today. I'm going to update my menu. But it would come into 1, 2, 3 o'clock and I still hadn't done anything. And it would say, remember when it used to work for you? You used to drink wine after work and stay in the office till 10, 11 o'clock sending emails. And it's true, it did work. Yeah, that was 15 years ago. So every day during the COVID years, that would happen to me. And I would give into the voice and I would drink. And within 20, 30 minutes, I'd always drink faster than I expected, no matter how much I vowed not to. And I'd blow through the good buzz and I'd be off to the races, goofing off on social media, whatever. But I'd wake up the next day, vowing I wasn't going to drink that day and go through the same exact process. And again, it was largely to be productive. And I've realized that's a parallel, and that's why things like Adderall, that's what they do to help incent ADHDers to perform. So much more to come on that. This guy Ali, I bought into his program. I think he's nailed it, and I think together he and I are gonna do a lot of groundbreaking thinking. So with no further ado, please enjoy. And I will say, speaking of ADD, I noticed my first podcast, which is from the first week of October, said, next week I'll be launching my community. And now today is November 12th. So it said October 12th I'd be launching. Here we are a month later. I still haven't launched it, postponed it. Not just because of the ADD, which I'm making significant strides on, but I'm also actually trying to figure out what I want to do. I'm starting to think I really want to do a daily podcast because I really enjoy it. And I really think I can bring a lot here. And I still haven't found a daily go-to. So guess that'll do it. Thanks for watching, as always. Enjoy. Okay, welcome into Cappy Hour. Today with my guest, Ali. We're here to talk about ADHD. What's up, buddy?
Hey, man.
Excellent. I'm going to want to start off with you giving your quick summary. But I was thinking, I need to mention in advance, this is not a paid promotional ad. This was my idea. I love talking about ADHD as much as, and I'm even going to call it ADD for short. I love talking about it as much as I do sobriety. I overcame alcoholism by getting obsessed with it. And now I plan to overcome this by getting obsessed with it. And I really identified with you, man. Your Facebook ad had so many comments and they were all positive. I've never seen an ad with A, so many comments, and B, all positive, other than the couple fools that are like, ADD is a made up thing. So that was amazing.
Just work harder.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm just a huge believer. I'm definitely going to talk about your program, which I am in. But again, this was all my idea. And with that said, you can give your background, which is kind of in your ads, which kind of really differentiated you and excited me about your program. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Thank you for the intro. Yeah, just real quick. I mean, my name is Ali Alqaraghuli. I was doing my PhD at Northeastern University, and I was 26 years old at the time, and I found out I had ADHD. It was my last year. and I had been dragging it for a while. And my dissertation, I was like procrastinating it for a long time. And that my entire life, 0 to like 26, I just thought I was very like lazy, and who knows, maybe there's some truth to that, but I would blame myself a lot for like just not getting things done on time, waiting last minute to get things done. And I always just internalize that as like, oh man, something's wrong with me. I'd be kind of like ashamed of it. Like people would think I'm unreliable or not. And then when I was 26, I figured out what ADHD even was. I read a bunch of books on ADHD, and I was like, whoa, like this is just how my brain works, and I just need to figure out how to deal with it. And I just changed my approach entirely. I just started experimenting with building systems and whatnot. And that same year, I actually graduated my PhD. And then shortly after, I got my dream job at NASA. I was a postdoctoral fellow for 2 years. And during my postdoc, I relaunched my company, Next Level Systems, to help people with ADHD, entrepreneurs with ADHD, be their most productive self, which is what we do right now. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell.
All right. And yeah, on that note about the lazy thing, I have a couple buddies basically accuse me of having no work ethic. And I've come to realize that's kind of one way to define ADHD. Our brains almost don't allow us to focus on the real work. But I did read recently, there's a term called ADHD paralysis, which may seem similar to procrastination, but we're all procrastinating at one point or another. But with ADD paralysis, when a person's overloaded with information and tasks, they begin to shut down and freeze. And this response is typically out of their control. And I think I want to educate the world and overcome the stigma behind alcoholism. People think we just lack willpower, that we're just weaker than they are, the normal drinkers, and that's not it at all. Yeah. And as you said many times, zero willpower will help you over. You always assume zero willpower. And I guess you can talk about that. One of your ads has said, if about your calendaring, and you just always assume zero willpower, and it's all about systems, designing systems around that.
If you build for the worst case scenario, you're gonna get it to work every time. I think the problem most people do is they build for the best case scenario, which is discipline and willpower. Of course, when you have high levels of discipline and willpower, that could work. Anything could work. But what about majority of the time when you don't have that? You need to have systems that work even when you have the absolute lowest of motivation, discipline, and willpower.
Yeah. You mentioned the whole, try harder thing. And it just reminded me, there's a comedian talked about how when someone that doesn't speak English and they say, oh, I don't understand. And instead you just say it slower and louder, but to them, you're still speaking, gibberish. It's not going to matter. I'm going to save the impression, but it's really funny. But it's if you didn't know Chinese and then they spoke it slower and louder, it wouldn't help. And same thing. It doesn't help to tell us to just put it on your calendar, block out the time, and all that stuff. Although when I tell people that, I say that's a big part of your program. But I said, if you don't learn it from an expert that can explain the proper way to execute it, it's just like I learned transcendental meditation, which is just like all it is chanting a mantra. But I paid $500 to learn it. And if I hadn't gone through that, I wouldn't be able to do it to the level that I can. And I wouldn't try to train somebody to just say, hey, here's a mantra. Here's all you got to do is sit down and repeat it. So I guess the last kind of thing about your program is that's what you do, right? It's a 6-week program where you really train people how to leverage systems like calendars, right?
Yeah, exactly. And calendar is only one small system. We actually cover that in our Hyperfocus program, which is we offer that for only $29. And the goal of the calendar, so like the reason our stuff works is because I'm someone who has ADHD, but I'm also a systems engineer. So I got a deep understanding of the problem, and I went and I built systems for the solution. And you first have to understand the problem. The problem is in your brain. Like this is why, and by the way, like if someone right here with ADHD is watching this or like, you still have to take full ownership. ADHD is not your fault, but it's still your responsibility. So you still have to take ownership. It's just that how you decide to take ownership should be about like the way that makes the most sense. And what I figured out to be the most sense is if my brain has certain limitations, let's say my working memory is a little bit weaker than most people, meaning I'm more likely to be forgetful. I'm more likely to remember things. I could either pretend that that's going to change and I could try to like will my memory into like getting better, or I can build an external system that helps me remember things and helps me be mindful of the things that I need in my life. Like the analogy I give is that if I were to like try to go somewhere fast, and let's say I'm not that good of a runner, I could try to train and run and get in shape and whatnot. Like let's say I'm practicing against Usain Bolt, or I could just go like build a Lamborghini and I could just smoke Usain Bolt by having an external system that helps me get somewhere fast. So the epiphany I had when I was 26 years old is the way to fix ADHD is, and you can't really like fix it. You're not going to change the circuitry inside your brain, but the way to fix your behavior day to day, despite having ADHD, is to build external systems that guide your behavior. And that way, if you're like me and you can't really be on medication or you don't want to be on medication, then you can still have optimal results and optimal productivity levels.
That's great. And your program includes weekly coaching calls where I say it in a respectful way. He basically treated me like a child every week. Like, let's pull up your calendar. Let's see how you're doing. Are you putting your tasks in your calendar? Are you color coding them, etc.? And often I wouldn't. And then he'd say, okay, right now we're going to put them in. I got misty-eyed on a couple of those calls because I cannot believe I need to have this level of treatment. And then again, there's so many parallels to alcoholism, and acceptance is a big one of them. It's like, I couldn't believe this liquid was destroying my life.
Yeah.
And now it's really this disorder. I used to think it was just the drinking that kept me hermited and unproductive. And then I was approaching a year of sobriety, and I have a video on this where I thought I just had this paralysis of initiation caused by the brain damage I did to my prefrontal cortex. But I realized it wasn't getting any better. And then I realized, thanks to my therapist, that I do have full-blown ADHD. So you do need a level of acceptance that your brain is not broken, and that you do need to do the work. Just like with quitting drinking, you have to do the work in order to overcome this, even if you're on meds, but especially if you're not, which didn't work for me. And I know you're not did you ever try meds?
I tried the medications. I would just get really bad crashes. Like I would, none of it really worked for me. And after only a few days, I would just realize the downside is bigger than the upside. And you have to also understand, ADHD is still like a relatively new thing. There has been ADHD papers for a very long time. But only now we're starting to truly understand, just like how the human brain is still we used to think the brain was not as plastic as we know now. So the challenge is, yes, like the medication can work for a lot of people, but we're still figuring out what ADHD even is. We still don't fully understand what ADHD even is. Some researchers think it's purely genetic. Some people say, nope, it's genetic and it's amplified via trauma. Some people say it's purely a trauma response. There's research papers showing different things. So we're still not that, we're not at a high level of deep understanding what ADHD even is. But I like the parallels you have to alcoholism and ADHD, because any type of addictive behavior is usually some type of dopamine circuitry related things in your brain. And ADHD people are a lot more likely to fall into addictive behaviors, usually because people with ADHD have chronically lower levels of dopamine, or like your dopamine is unregulated. When you're really not interested in something, it's really hard to get started. When you're super interested in something, suddenly you're like working on it for like 9 hours, also known as hyperfocus. So that dysregulation of dopamine has a parallel with addictive behavior. And that's why someone with ADHD is a lot more likely to spend the night doom scrolling on their phone, or like just laying in bed all day. Like it's hard to change states. And same thing can happen with alcoholism. And I agree with what you said. Like the answer really is to like stop beating yourself over it. Stop thinking it's your personal fault. It's not your fault. It's still your responsibility, but it's not your fault. You have to understand that your brain is just operating in a certain way. And the moment you understand what your brain is even doing, you kind of open it up and look underneath the hood, and then start building systems that work with how this brain is working. Only then are you going to actually change your day-to-day behavior, and only then are you going to start getting the results you want.
Yeah, bingo. And you also had said it's not your fault, but it is your responsibility. And that's our
100%.
Rule number one we say in sobriety is the same thing. And the problem is sometimes it takes a long time for people to accept responsibility for it.
Yeah.
Some people it takes a lifetime, but once you do, that's again when you have to step up and do the work. So, you mentioned, not here, but you mentioned previously the book ADHD 2.0 really helped you. The one that helped me,
Yeah.
and it's the greatest title, is Your Brain is Not Broken. And it's the same thing with alcoholism. People think they're broken and that it's a moral failing or they lack willpower, but it's not at all.
Yeah.
So the sooner you accept that. And it's interesting you mentioned, and it's the same thing, the genetic debate versus nature nurture. I do think alcoholism is largely genetic. In my family, super quickly, I take 99% after my mother's Irish side. I've got the gene. My siblings, brother and sister, take 99 after the Italian side. And just like my Italian father, they can take it or leave it when it comes to drinking. So I believe in that. But I do also believe you can drink yourself into the disorder. And I do believe in the case of ADD, I didn't have it as a child. I think it's odd. They say you can just develop it as an adult. I find it very odd that you can just suddenly lose your executive function as an adult unless you brought that on. And I have a theory that alcoholism is certainly one of the ways, or substance abuse disorder or trauma can cause that. Substance abuse, alcoholism, excessive drinking, as I said, does brain damage to your prefrontal cortex, and that's where the executive function sits. So I believe that's when it happened. I was pretty functional until my 30s probably, and I started abusing alcohol at 18. As a child, I had no real issue. I was a little clumsy, a little inattentive, but I had no problem focusing on real work and all that. So, and then trauma, a response to trauma is a survival mechanism. Your brain shuts down and you just care about surviving the day. So in both cases of alcoholism and trauma, you build up a neural pathway that's just survival mode, and you cease worrying about actually any kind of urgency to get any amount of work done. And of course, alcoholism also causes major dopamine dysregulation. So I think there's a lot to be done there, and no one really is even talking about that. So I think I've got some groundbreaking work to do with your help on that. So
Yeah, absolutely, man.
yeah.
Yeah, and I love your categorization of, yes, I mean, we know that alcohol, a lot of hard drugs do damage your brain cells. And if a lot of that is in the prefrontal cortex where a lot of the executive functions sit, of course, your memory is going to start suffering, your decision making will suffer, your prioritization is going to suffer. So yeah, I really think that ADHD is not a good name because it's talking about the symptoms, not the root causes. If I were to change the name of ADHD, I would just call it executive dysfunction and dopamine dysregulation disorder. So like the executive functioning, which is not properly happening, it's causing you to be inattentive, forgetful, whatnot. And the dysregulation of your dopamine is causing you to dread opening your mailbox and spending 10 hours reading articles on Wikipedia when you know you should be doing something else,
You just hit my number one question. And I was going to lead off saying, you talk about that those are ADHD is, I don't want to repeat what you just said, but I'm going to. It's that name is just the symptoms, and it's actually executive dysfunction and dopamine dysregulation. So,
yes.
But what kills me about education is that even the experts talk about inattentive, what's the inattentiveness and the hyperactivity. Neither one of those. Well, yes. And not only that, that's what everyone thinks it is. No one even, one little part of the inattentive description, like they categorize 3 kinds of ADHD: inattentive, hyperactive, or combined. And only in the inattentive is there one of many descriptions that talk about executive function or even describe it. They don't even use a term, I think. They just talk about lack of organizational skills. It's the biggest part of ADHD that not even talked about. That's why I emailed you and said, another name is I like the ADHD paralysis, or that should even just be its own category, right? I mean, inattentive, hyperactive, those are things, but it's the paralysis that's really the debilitating part that's not talked about, and that's why I hate that everybody thinks they have ADHD, right? Because everybody's inattentive. Everyone's
Because everyone's
distracted.
on Instagram or something. Yeah, no.
Exactly.
ADHD is very serious. It's very like there's patterns. There's a difference between being overwhelmed and having ADHD. People who have ADHD are the most prone to overwhelm. But being overwhelmed alone does not mean you have ADHD. It means you could just have a lot on your plate or you have a lot of stimulus exposure. But yeah, with ADHD, it's just your organizational skills, your executive functioning, your clarity, your ability to prioritize tasks. You just are unable to function properly in your thinking and planning and executing brain. And that's why I figured out the fastest, easiest, least shaming, most productive way is to just externalize those functions through an external clarity system, an external prioritization system, an external scheduling system, time estimation system, an external self-talk system, things that remind you of what you should tell yourself, an external identity system, things that remind you of who you are. Like the more you externalize these things, the less work I have to do inside my brain. And then I free up all of my mental bandwidth to just do problem solving or like experiencing whatever it is in the moment. And that's something that we're kind of already doing. Like a lot of people are obsessed with this idea of like, no, I just want to make my memory better. Okay, you could do that, but like, what is the function of the memory? The function of the memory is to remember things so you could use them in your day-to-day life and make good decisions. Well, if you externalize that and have almost like an external hard drive of things that you remember, and that helps you like dramatically, I find that to be a pretty cool idea. And we already have that. Like we already have our phones. Like we already have pieces of technology that we wear and that we externalize almost as organs. And if you take your executive functioning and do the same with that, and that helps you dramatically in regards to your ADHD, I think that's a pretty cool idea, because then the only thing that matters is the results. You'll start actually doing the right things, and you're almost like building an exoskeleton for yourself for things that help you work on the right things and actually do the right things.
Yeah, 100%. So, yes, I want to, being distracted or defocused is not really ADD. It is ADHD. Everyone is distracted by the internet. Everyone probably has 10 or 20 tabs open or loves to web surf and not do their real work.
Yeah.
But at some point, they can then focus on their real work. They get more of a dopamine hit out of even just doing regular work. They can maintain it, etc. For us, the only time we can do that is when we get into essentially a flow state, which is you basically have to train your brain to get into. When I quit drinking, I left my business, which was a pizza shop. That's something that, I want to discuss. We can do, you work with a lot of entrepreneurs, and you say the deadlines don't really exist with entrepreneurs, at least before you launch your business. I can do blue collar work. The pizza joint, I used to be in sales, and it took me double the time to do everything. The pizza joint was great for me because I had to show up. I had to respond to demand. So I can do manual labor, blue collar work very easily. It's the white collar, the mental, the self-motivated work that is nearly impossible for us to do. My buddy said, you can't self-motivate. That's when he basically accused me of a no work ethic. You can't work from home and you can't run your own business. And it turns out he was right. And I thought it was just because of the brain damage from drinking, but it's because of this condition.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is something that a lot of people who can do well in school or do well in a corporate job, then they go launch their business and suddenly it's a big mess. Well, that's because you have external pressure, external consequences for not doing things. You have things to show up to, and if you don't show up, there's a consequence for doing that. And the example of that is actually my brother. My brother's a dentist. And he has a whole team that sets a schedule for him, sets up the chair for him, does a lot of things for him. So he shows up, like, let's say from 8 a.m. to like 5 p.m. And every part of the day has already been scheduled and designed. And there's a consequence to not showing up to these appointments. And because you're dealing with a patient and you're fixing something for them, you're helping them with something, you're focused. And so he has a really good external system. But I remember when I was like starting my online business, from my room in grad school, I really struggled because it was just me, and there was no external pressure, there was no deadlines, there's nothing goes wrong if I don't get something done. It just gets pushed on to the next day. And that's really the danger of not having the right systems, because yes, if you have external pressure, that's one way to do it. And I encourage everyone, an entrepreneur, try to hire at least one person early on, just to like have someone to kind of bounce ideas with, have some accountability with. That's definitely going to help, but that's not going to solve the root problem. The real root problem is these are all just symptoms that you're probably not clarifying, prioritizing, executing enough. And if you go to like a physical work environment, these things all help. Like if you have like an office you go to rather than work from home, that's going to help. For example, if you live by yourself versus you have a roommate can actually really help, because people, especially with ADHD, who self-isolate for a long period of time, that also is the absence of external pressure or norepinephrine, and that's not good either.
I'm loving this. I'm taking notes. You hit on so many things. I mean, I finally caved. You know, I live alone. I love being home. I love my place. I get a nice little courtyard view. But I finally caved and started paying for Work Bar, which is a shared office space. And I feel so much more studious there. You know, I compare it to a home gym versus going to the gym. I don't have the eye of the tiger when I'm at home. At least I didn't used to. I can do it more now, but still, when I go into work, and I'm surrounded by other people working as well. So yeah, your environment plays a big part, and you talk about that. You also talk about minimalization. That's the right word I want. Minimalist. A lot of successful people like Einstein, etc., were minimalists, right? You live in a minimalist environment, right? You have your environment.
Yeah. I call it a relentless subtraction. Just like get rid of as much as you can that does not help you achieve your goal or live the life that you want. And that's again because clutter, especially if you have ADHD, you're already overwhelmed. If you clutter your environment, you have too many things and too many options and too many choices and too many, oh, I could sit on this couch, I could sit on this desk. Like if you just get rid of all of that and keep the only thing that you need to do, it's just going to be easy for your brain cognitively every single day. Because again, especially with ADHD, you're very externally facing. Like your external environment influences you a lot more if you have ADHD versus if you don't. So if you curate your environment, your physical environment in a certain way, you can literally guide your day-to-day behavior on like autopilot in the best way possible. Yep.
And that's made your program, big breakthrough on that was they kept harping on me every week. Clean your environment. In fact, it was your coaching call. I got off. You said, get off this call and clean your environment. And I did it, and I've kept it up. I'm now obsessed with it. I almost hate to have anything out of place. And yeah, it's so key. And you mentioned your brother. I remember you talked about your brother on a video. And I said to Carla, my accountability partner, which is also so important to have. There's even a stat. You're much more likely to do something if you declare it and ideally have an accountability partner. And I said to Carla, his brother, that's blue collar work. That's manual labor. That's why he's more effective, you know, and that's true. I've said, I wish my business was a Shark Tank product because those people work 7 days. I'd have no problem. And that's why people take issue when I say this is a lack of work ethic. We have it. It's just very hard to bring it out. But if I invented a Shark Tank product that I had to build and wrap myself, I'd work 24/7. You know what a crazy analogy is? Yeah. Alcoholics almost wish I was one of them. I was envious of my accountability partner. She had just gotten a DUI at age 63. She knew she could never drink again after that experience. And I said, God, I've had a DUI, but it was long ago. I said, I wish I had a recent DUI. People try to engineer rock bottoms to force themselves into giving it up. And same thing, I wish I had a manual labor product. You know, it's working with my hands instead of my brain, but I don't. So I have to self-motivate, and we can only often do that when we have true deadlines, which is why I've been putting off launching my community forever, as you know, and you keep telling me to just launch it, and I get why, because as soon as I do, which is hopefully next week, I will have demands to meet and true deadlines, and I can be a machine when that happens.
Yeah. And again, like my only advice there is launch it with the intention of it failing rather than succeeding. Because I think very often, like, there's two types of procrastination. There's procrastination due to overwhelm or lack of clarity on steps or lack of action threshold on the first thing we got to do. But then there's procrastination due to emotional avoidance, which is like fear, which is like unmet expectations, which is like fear of change, where you may say, like, you may build up this expectation of this grand opening or grand launch, and part of you is fearful that that's not what ends up happening and it totally tanks. So you may push it back and back and back. What I have learned from the engineering world, to achieve your goal fast, like break it fast, see why it broke and fix it, is a much better methodology than think until you design the perfect solution, because you don't know what you don't know and you have blind spots. So the more quickly you get it to launch and fail, the more you figure out why it failed, and the faster you actually get it to fruition. I'll give you an example of this. So today in my business, because we're so booked out, like our sales calls are booked out, our demand is so booked out, we decided, me and Elijah, who's our sales director of enrollment, we decided to test an idea, which is we launched like a group selling call or a group information call where I teach people more about the program and see if they want to enroll in a live group setting. And we spent only 1 hour preparing for it, because our intention was, we're going to show up, we're going to totally bomb this thing, we're going to totally blow it up, we're going to see why it tanked, and then we're going to look at the feedback from people and see how we can improve it. And we scheduled 12 people. I think 8 of them showed up and 2 of them closed. And there's like 4 or 5 that could have closed, but that we're going to go back, look at the tape, take notes, see what we could do better. And then next week we'll make improvements. Like, it's much better that we accepted that this is not going to go somewhere initially, because had I kept delaying it until it's perfect, I would have never launched it. So my advice, do it like today, blow it up, accept that it's broken, talk to 1 or 2 clients, get feedback on why it sucks, and then improve it as you go, you know?
And I smiled at that, because a month ago on a call, you said, launch your community today. And I refused it. I still think I had some good reasons for that, but I also agree with you.
I understand. Yeah.
Starting with, my place was my environment was a mess. I could not.
Yeah, you had to get some system in place. I totally get that. But like, as long as, like, what's your intention for the community's launch? Do you expect it to be this grand success, or do you think it'll probably tank and you'll figure out why?
Right. Good point. Yes, it's going to start very slowly. It's not going to tank. It's going to be good from the beginning.
We just want to reduce that expectation, because that might be the thing that's like getting you to like fear starting it. You know?
Yep. It will feel like failure when I don't have 100 people signed up in the first week, but I've come with some of your help and some I already realized to accept that. And yes, it's amazing. You talk about a lot of stuff that I learned on my own as part of the recovery process, and I have videos on them. It's amazing that I had already done before taking your program on things like perfectionism, overcoming that people pleasing, and iterating. You talk about that all the time. I'm surprised you didn't use the actual word, but you even talk about, you went to SpaceX and they purposely fail and then iterate. That's why I tell people those rockets blowing up are often on purpose. And my word of the year, I've never was a word of the year guy until a sober friend made me pick one 2 years ago, and I had 2. And one was iterate. I couldn't even hang paintings in my place for 5 years because I wanted them perfect. And I finally just threw them up, and I said I can iterate. And fortify was my other one, and that is to strengthen from mental and physical attack. In the drinking case, it's from the voice. And in this case, it's strengthen against distraction. You have to do the work. And that's such a big part of this. I gave an analogy to one of my coach who works for you, Jamal, today, that I got from my accountability partner. I've been very resistant to putting those systems in place, to properly calendaring, to doing the self-affirmation work. She said, not taking the time, because I don't want to take the time. It's the same reason I don't clean my room. I don't want to take the time because I think I'm going to be productive. Instead, I end up goofing off on my computer, even though but anyway, she said, what you're doing is like walking because you don't want to stop to put gas in your car. How good is that?
Yeah, that's a really good saying. And one thing I really like to ask myself is what I'm doing working? And I just look at my patterns. And this is good if you like journal, or if you track your behavior, or you track what you do. It's really good habit, because then you can look at the data and say, what have I done this week? Nothing. Well, maybe I need to change my approach, because if I keep telling myself the same thing I'm telling myself, I'm going to have another week like the last week. So yeah, I agree. It's like is what I'm doing working? And if the answer is no, then maybe it's time to try something else.
Yeah. I mean, we say all the time the, alternate definition of insanity. People come to think it's the real definition, but doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. Every day, the voice would talk me into drinking for the reasons I thought it was for, because it would do when it used to work for me. It stopped working long ago, but it took me 10, 15 years to accept that it stopped working for me. And that's how it works with alcoholic. And it's the same thing here. And, I do want to touch on that. What Adderall and Ritalin and medications do is they give you artificial dopamine hits. It's interesting. ADHD people are, this funny thought hit me. ADHD people are overwhelmed, right? We're in a constant state of overwhelm. I even call it compound overwhelm because the way we react to overwhelm is to shut down, which then creates even more overwhelm the next day and the next day. So it's like compound interest. You can use that. So even though we're overstimulated, the medical cure is to give us a stimulant. I find that amusing, right? But what it does is it gives us artificial dopamine that actually somehow incents our brain to want to work. But it still doesn't get us necessarily to work on the right things.
It's not solving the root issue. It's only putting a Band-Aid on the problem.
Exactly. And it's giving you artificial dopamine hits, which is why if you are an alcoholic, it's not going to work for you. It hasn't worked for anyone I know. I tried it.
There's a crash. And the crash, you're going to have cravings. You'll go get McDonald's. You'll start drinking because you need to make up for that dopamine deficit.
Yeah, there you go, deficit, because it recognizes the artificial dopamine and it shuts down your dopamine receptors. Just like people don't understand why, if you quit drinking for 1, 10, 20, 50 years, you pick back up again, very short time, you're right back, if not worse than where you were. Your brain doesn't forget, and it immediately will start to shut down those dopamine receptors, so you need to drink more and more and more to get it. And that's what happened to me with Adderall. It stopped working for me very quickly, so I started abusing it, trying to take more before I finally just gave it up. And I realized the alternate to medication, and this is a big unknown, even by alleged experts, there is an alternative to medicine. It's doing the work and work through a program like yours. But people aren't even aware.
If you build external systems and structures that guide you into doing the work and make doing the work the easy thing and the path of least resistance, I think that's actually the best long-term solution, because then you're not too dependent on a drug. Because what if you run out of your medication? And everyone that's on medication, and if it's working for you, I encourage you to keep using that. If anything, you're lucky, because there's some people whom medication doesn't work for, it doesn't help a lot, or there's a lot of side effects, or it's not available for them often or whatnot. I just think that the most reliable thing for me personally, I can really only speak for myself, like I only got my stuff together and I only started achieving crazy results in business and in all areas of life once I just built external systems that just help me work on the right thing and actually sit down and do it and guide my day-to-day behavior to be the person I want to be. And that's the only thing that's ever worked. And from a physics perspective, that's the only thing that will work. From a neuroscience perspective, that's the only thing that would work like long term.
Yeah. And the other fascinating part, it's such a parallel to alcoholism, is as I say in alcoholism, when you quit drinking, you have to replace the artificial dopamine hits with natural ones. You even have to triple up in the first 6 months to overcome it. So it's the same thing here. You need, in lieu of medication, you need natural dopamine hits. And you talk about that. One thing I think you could talk a little more personally is you need to keep, and maybe you do and I missed it, but you have to keep them going throughout the day. I discovered I was getting them all in the morning with my cardio, with my cold showers, and sharing. That's a huge, engaging your language skills, engage your prefrontal cortex. That's why sharing's so key. But I was doing it all in the morning. And then by the time I sat down to work, I was depleted again. And that's when
you need to recharge.
And you've talked about you do cold shower in the morning and you add one at night. I've been up to at least 3 a day, just a 1 minute.
It helps every time.
Yeah. And you talk about a 15-minute morning shower, which I think is funny hey, good for you. I never want to take that time, but I do a normal, regular shower, warm shower, but then I do cold at the end for up to 3 minutes. I do a dance.
Oh, I do that too. I do like a normal warm shower, and I have my shower sticky notes.
Me too.
It's one
Thanks
of
to
my
you.
favorite systems. Yeah, those are badass. And yeah, I just make the last minute super cold. And I have a timer. And again, if you have ADHD or time blind, I would encourage you to get a timer in your shower. And I set like 15 minutes. And because there's a countdown, the moment it hits like 1 minute, 10 seconds, I'm like, oh boy, here it comes. And then at the 1 minute mark, I just make it cold and I get it over with. If you don't have like a sense of external time, that's going to make it a lot harder also to do the shower, you know?
Yeah. And I have many videos on cold showers, cold immersion. I'm even doing cold
Cold
baths.
shower is awesome. There's research papers that show cold water exposure increases dopamine by 250%, norepinephrine by 500%, which are the two molecules that compel taking action in ADHD.
That's great.
Or
I
in
give
general.
I give the 250 stat all the time for up to 3 hours, by the way. So
Yes.
that is huge. And that's why 3 hours. So guess what you got to do at the end of the 3 hours? Take another one. And that's where I was going. I've now, and most people are going to cringe, but listen, you want to improve your life, you want to level up, you want to overcome this, it's what you got to do. I now will just jump in there, go straight into the cold. I never thought I could do it, but I go straight into the cold. Yeah, it's shocking for 10 seconds.
Yeah.
And then I do a 1 minute. And then boom, I get that kicky. And I end up staying in there for 3.
If you want to make it even more potent, do like a 5 minute of hardcore exercise, like push-ups, pull-ups, jumping jacks, get your heart rate up. Then do the 1 minute or the 10 seconds cold. That's gonna be like triple the effect.
100%. I just did a video on that as well. Absolutely. And I was talking with Carla, one of my accountability partners, because I said, start middle of the day. You're not motivated? Do some jumping jacks. And she calls them star jumps. And I discovered star jumps are harder than jumping jacks. You start standing. Star jumps, you start from a squat position. So now I'm doing those.
That's good.
And by the way, coffee you drink for caffeine to be alert, you do 25 of those and just drink water, you'll be way more alert throughout the day. With that said,
That's very true. Yeah. And then coffee is
crash fast.
that's a topic of its own. I think if used properly is beneficial, but if used incorrectly can be very harmful.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. So I think one thing I want to touch on is these kids, these parents, they asked this expert. I watched this ADD webinar by ADDitude magazine or Attitude community. They're supposed to be experts. This guy basically thinks medication's the only answer. And a parent asked, what if my kid doesn't want to take it? And he basically said, try to convince him harder. And I want to be like, no, you have to.
That sounds not good. It sounds almost like child abuse. You know?
It truly does. And he said, you tell your kid that in 20 years, he's going to appreciate that you tried at least hard to get him on medication. That was his answer. So no, parents, there are other ways, but you need a coach, you need a program. I kind of want to start a community for kids, or you can. There's so much more you could do, but you've already got a couple other businesses.
There's a lot. And that's something I think a lot about. Kids is a much harder thing because the parents ultimately have control. So we have to educate the parents on what ADHD is. Man, I really think step one, we need to educate people on what ADHD even is, because most people, majority of people, ADHD or not, don't even understand it. So if the parents understood what it was, unfortunately, a lot of people who are like physicians that prescribe ADHD meds, God bless them. Some are good. Some do critically think. Unfortunately, because of how medical training is, you just memorize a bunch of slides in medical school and you just work yourself to death. Like, I feel like a lot of doctors don't actually take the time to critically think or to go over the research papers or just think and get a deep understanding and try to use a systems approach to say, why does this break? Why does this not break? This is not a criticism of doctors. Like, some doctors are fantastic, but unfortunately, a lot of other doctors are not that great. So medical experts are meant to be experts and people that we trust. My advice to people, yes, have the best doctor that you can, but also ADHD is very new and a lot of doctors don't fully know what they're talking about. Like, try to do as much learning, try to like actually understand what ADHD even is, like on your own, and then bring that knowledge to your doctor and then have a conversation with your doctor. The more informed you can be, the more your doctor can also be informed, and you guys can come to a decision together.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, one good thing that guy said on that webinar is that, do you know, 93% of psychiatric trainings for psychiatrists do not include ADHD. It's mind blowing. In
Yeah.
2025, I almost don't believe it,
Yeah.
but that's incredible. One other stat, and so it's true. And also, doctors, medical world, very uneducated on alcoholism. It's insane. People also lie to their
These
doctors.
are all very new, Brian. Like in the doctor's defense and in humanity's defense, we're just learning what these things actually are. Like we're only now looking through the microscope at what actually is alcoholism in a way that's productive and that's pragmatic and results oriented rather than just like what we have always known, you know?
Yeah. Yeah,
So I do
absolutely.
give people some grace, but it's responsibility of people like you and me to go see what works, to document what works, and start showing it to other people, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. 1,000%. And I promise I'd finish on time. So we got 2 minutes or less. I have to tell people that they say undiagnosed ADHD people are up to 400% more likely to develop a substance abuse disorder. And that makes total sense. I've heard anywhere from 2 to 4x. But
Yeah.
the reason, so I realized I did that for the last 10, 15 years. When I talked about the definition of insanity, every single day at my pizza shop, I didn't open till 4 o'clock. Every day I wanted to update my menu. I wanted to do better marketing. And that voice, I'd wake up saying, I'm not going to drink that day. And that voice would beat me down and say, no, drink. You'll be more productive. You'll be more creative. And I gave in every single day around 1, 2 o'clock. It never worked. And yet I did it over again the next day. So it's very important for people to know that drinking did work for me for a while. It gave me that dopamine hit that made me more productive. That's why people like to drink when they clean the house and things like that. But if you're an alcoholic, it'll stop working for you. And you cannot self-medicate with alcohol.
Yeah.
Get you in the
I
same
agree.
problem I did. And we got to go, Mike. What I want to show you on my phone is my cousin just posted that he cleaned his whole place. It looks amazing. And he talks about because he finally got access to meds and that allowed him to do it. And even me knowing how bad this is at first was like, really, dude, you needed that to do that to your place? But it's absolutely true. This thing is, as someone, I read a great quote, we will not do things, even stuff that we want to do. Executive dysfunction does not discriminate. It is real. And time blindness, you allude to a couple times. I had to discover that on my own. But for those of you that always misestimate time, you're always late, things take double the time, even stuff you do all the time, that's time blindness. And that's what really made me realize I had ADHD.
Absolutely.
All right,
Man.
where
You
can
are
people
spot on.
find you?
You can just Google Ali Alqaraghuli. That's ALQARAGHULI. If that's too long, just Google Next Level Systems. That's our company. You can find us on School as well. Our program is Next Level Peak Performance. And yeah, watch our stuff and build some cool systems and change your life.
Awesome. And I'm going to be bugging you for a sequel, so get ready.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. Hell yeah. Awesome. Thanks
All
so
right.
much for having me, Brian. Thank
You're
you, man.
very welcome. Thank you. Okay, custom ending. Eventually I'll have a standard one, just pleading for you folks to like, share, subscribe, write a review, preferably a good one, please. I beg you. But for now, I want to add, if you recognized or wondered about Ali's background, he's actually based in Cambridge, Mass, Kendall Square. I knew I liked him from the beginning. He's not from here originally, but he has family in the Boston area. And I also want to say, I talked at the beginning about how we don't really talk about ADHD on sobriety calls. And I even had a friend who I know suffers from it. And she was talking about not being able to get out of bed. And if I didn't know she had it, I would have thought she just still was dealing with alcohol-induced depression. But I know that it's largely from ADD-induced depression as well. It's very depressing to get out of bed every day, already overwhelmed, knowing you didn't do anything the day before because you were overwhelmed, and it builds up. I call it compound overwhelm. So again, I think so important to talk about this more and more, and I'm eager to do some Googling and see what else is out there. And that aside, it's funny, I sent a copy of this podcast in advance to my friend Laura, and she replied and she said, "Nice job. I really liked it for a first time." And I said, "Thanks, Laura. Although if I didn't know better, I think that was a backhanded compliment. This is actually about my I don't know, 8th, 10th guest. Is that what you meant? Or I said, I'm happy to take, your critique, any critiques, what they call constructive feedback. And she said, lighten up, Francis. You did great. She said, I didn't know you interviewed others, as this is the first one I've seen with a guest. But she did say, perhaps work on ending more smoothly, that's all. So I thought it was funny. I did end rather abruptly with Ali, but it's always a little awkward at the end there. So I guess that'll do it. And as I said at the beginning, if you could share this at minimum, I'd greatly appreciate it. Just think if every one of you shared this with one person, that'd be like 14 texts. So appreciate it. And I'll plead more for reviews someday, but they say that's so important to podcasts getting propagated. So that'll do it. As always, stronger, sober. Thanks for listening. Oh, I said watching at the beginning, but I know largely people listen to this, but you can watch and see my pretty face on YouTube. Peace. Perhaps you're looking at it right now. Hello. All right. See you later.